Almost immediately, you'll realize Directive 8020 and the rest of the Dark Pictures Anthology aren't alike. Panning for the first time through the sleep technician's quarters aboard interstellar colony ship Cassiopeia, Sims floating horizontally as she fixes her boots, Carter laser focused on pruning his bonsai tree, a foreboding thump rocks the vessel. Neither sleep tech shows serious concern, engaging instead in cordial discussion on whether to investigate or check in with the ship's all-knowing AI system, Oracle, first. Once they've chosen, or rather you decide for them, you're thrust into real-time control of Carter, prompting sliding doors and strolling through corridors, moving from the vantage of a familiar third person. Straight away, you might be thinking about agency. I know I was. Directive 8020 promises to be the series at its most mechanically ambitious, but I'm already detecting a tension between my character's broader movement and expectations for narrative immersion. The key question is this: can Supermassive Games successfully blend the upcoming survival horror gameplay with their signature interactive drama style? And real-time controls and a sci-fi setting aren't the only deviations here. As each of the game's 8 episodes conclude, you'll notice a diminished role for the curator. Episodic summaries aren't lost entirely, they're just handled differently. The game also is built for the single-player experience. There's no shared story at launch, although there is a multiplayer party mode which I'll get to later. The shift to Unreal Engine 5 supports the game's cinematic presentation, but these early ambles through dimly lit foyers give the impression this game is looking closely at Dead Space for its inspiration, rather than refining its anthology roots. The biggest shift, those third-person real-time controls bring forth a mechanical mindset too, something you've likely experienced countless times before, especially if you've played the aforesaid necromorph slicing horror Dead Space, The Last of Us, or even Alan Wake 2. You're accustomed to walking, crouching, whipping out a flashlight, and so on and so forth. Yet this fundamental change also introduces something less tangible. For the first time in the series, horror isn't something you simply react to, but something you actively participate in. Together with presenting binary dilemmas, a hallmark of the series retained for this title, then Directive 8020 stands to merge its derivative control schemes with the psychological fallout of following repeated moral quandaries, elevating it perhaps into something that still feels like a Dark Pictures game. Real-time control's biggest problem, however, reveals itself soon enough. During the game's frequent stealth sections, with looping patrols, repeating dialogue, and a predictable structure of sneaking, rerouting power, unlocking some doors, and sneaking some more, the design is inarguably formulaic. It's clear that this isn't Supermassive's strong suit, and it's a shade disappointing that stealth happens so extensively throughout. It's kind of like the game wants me to feel hunted, but rarely did I actually feel vulnerable, even if, in another switch up from the Dark Pictures formula, death can occur outside of scripted events too. The Last of Us comparisons bear more weight here. The threats you encounter are eerily similar to clickers in both form and function. But while outdated stealth design ultimately undermines a vulnerability the game is trying to create, the sense that you're truly exposed is found instead amongst Directive 8020's core emotional themes, specifically trust and paranoia. Thanks to an invasive extraterrestrial force, a sort of the Thing type organism which can replicate any member of the Cassiopeia's crew, it wasn't long before I was scrutinizing every interaction, looking for shifts in dialogue, expression, or even body language to clue me in on who's who. Even a character's augmented reality messaging system could be a source for potential deception, as could any voice coming through in-ear communication. Tie into this the interpersonal relationships between certain characters, such as familial bonds, shared traumas, etc., then any moment of social awkwardness could, at least in theory, be a mimic, or perhaps a hidden agenda, or something else entirely. Throughout my playthrough, I felt the game successfully establishes, then escalates trust and paranoia, both through emotional attachment and wider atmosphere. The immediate counterpoint to this, however, is I'm unsure how many scenarios I actually faced a mimic and didn't actually realize. Now, I know this could be deliberate, but allow me to elaborate here. You see, if I did interact with a mimic and didn't know, surely the fact an alien has infiltrated the ranks would be revealed later. Standoffs do occur, of course, but they're infrequent. The fear of deception is constant, but the reality felt surprisingly rare. I consistently engaged in interrogation sort of gameplay, but seldom was there actually clarity. What's more, a character's personas switch from one episode to the next. They'd speak with precision or assertiveness, only to soften their delivery later on, leading me to suspect I'm dealing with a nefarious being. But if my suspicions aren't addressed either way, I grew to realize that I'm continually being pulled between genuine uncertainty and red herrings. The overriding feeling throughout is that I was an omniscient observer, the only one with an overview of the entire situation, especially during the early episodes before the crew even realizes there are shapeshifters among them. This of course had a knock-on effect with how I related to certain characters too, leaving them at the mercy of my own prejudices. Without giving too much away, there's a crewmate I oppose, so when my dialogue choices led to a clutch moment for this specific character, my uncertainty wasn't established enough in-game. Now, that isn't to say the characters aboard the Cassiopeia are unlikable. The reality is far from it, actually. The game is absolutely at its best when it slows down and lets the characters collide. Their interpersonal dynamics and loyalties are truly put to the test, and with strong narrative pacing, the emotional payoff in most late-game decisions is powerful. If my favorite character does succumb to space death, however, Directive 8020's turning point system gives me the opportunity to rewind the clock, to retry their pivotal moments, perhaps to change the course of their fate. Through a visible through line, selecting which scenes I'd like to reattempt is simple enough, but for me, I felt this feature was too immersion breaking for a first playthrough. I prefer the tension and choice finality, feeling that the ability to turn back time kinda just undermines my original instinctual decision making. Turning Points instead feels like an interesting post-game experiment rather than a core design. Or to frame it another way here, it's akin to replaying an RPG where I create a character archetype that's rude and aggressive, for example, just to see how far I can push the NPC's resolve. It's not me in real life, but it's fun to take a turn as someone else in game, right? But in Directive 8020, I find it most immersive if I play and react instinctively rather than thinking about how else to behave in a situation. If you're anything like me, but you don't even want the temptation to rewrite a character's fate, then a Turning Points-less survivor mode is a worthy option. Or of course, you can engage in Turning Points more thoroughly if playing with someone else. It's here, it's in the game's controller swapping party mode where it has a greater value, where there's less scrutiny on the unfolding narrative. Instead, my partner and I discuss plot points, sometimes heatedly if we're honest. Rewinding moments yielded more fun when coinciding with lively discussions. Now, revisiting specific moments isn't just a way of exploring different outcomes for the crew, but they're a chance to steer conversations in a different direction, shaping and reshaping each character's traits as you go. Establishing traits adjusts a destiny meter for individual characters as well, with each having 2 that can be unlocked. These can influence a character's final fate, their overarching narrative arc, and relationship dynamics rather than just relying on your binary life or death choices. Whilst I do appreciate this system, like Turning Points, I feel it requires multiple playthroughs to truly understand its depth. Still, Directive 8020's mechanical ambition, tonal shift, and character systems aren't complex by any stretch, arguably making this entry the most accessible in the Dark Pictures Anthology, albeit less recognizable or even distinct. And I don't mean that in an inherently negative way. This is the most confident and forward-looking title in this series, bravely shedding its legacy to pursue something more modern. But it does of course come at a cost. What it gains in immediacy, it loses in distinctiveness that previously set the anthology apart. Yet, for all of these grievances for what it isn't, I must still praise what the game actually is. At its best, it's driven by a thick, oppressive atmosphere, elevated by excellent sound design, from cavernous groans and piercing cues, to a score which leans on familiar horror motifs, atonal strings, for instance, without losing effectiveness. Alongside character-driven tension, it's in these stiller moments where the game really shines, and Supermassive delivers its suffocating themes of trust and paranoia with confidence. The studio's ambition isn't always matched by execution, with stealth encounters rarely delivering on their promise of vulnerability. Occasionally, flat facial animations and performance stutters dilute the experience further, the former especially jarring as so much character interaction relies on interrogating expressions and mannerisms. But then, saying that, the game underdelivers on its mimic concept overall. They could be among us, but on my playthrough at least, they rarely actually revealed themselves. Even with its inconsistencies though, Directive 8020 marks a compelling step forward for the Dark Pictures Anthology, trading the series' identity for an immersive, real-time leap. So, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.